And welcome back. Just hours from now, the first Election Day polls will open and Americans will head out to cast their ballots to determine which party controls the House and Senate. An ABC News Washington Post poll finding the majority of Americans prefer Republicans to handle the economy, inflation, and crime. But in terms of abortion and climate change, well, most Americans say they want Democrats in charge. For more, let's bring in ABC News reporter Jay O'Brien, along with our political panel, ABC News contributor and former press secretary to First Lady Jill Biden, Michael LaRosa, also Ramesh Ponnuru, editor at the National Review. All right, what a great panel. Jay, let's start with you. President Biden, he's been hitting the campaign trail in this final stretch, of course, rallying support for Democratic candidates. Let's talk about what he's been up to today.
Yeah, he goes to Maryland tonight to campaign for Wes Moore, who's running for governor there. This is a race where Wes Moore is likely to win. He's the favorite there. He's the Democratic candidate in Maryland. It's part of a recent theme for the president of going to places where Democrats' chances in the election are somewhat clear. He went to New York, where Democrats typically have the edge, although Republicans are saying that they might have a last-minute surge of support there. He went to Florida last week to campaign for Charlie Crist and Val Demings, who polls show Republicans with the edge in that state. It goes to that overall question of which Democrats want the president to come to their state, to come to their district, to campaign for them, and which don't. And oftentimes, with the exception of John Fetterman, who Biden has campaigned for a few times now, a lot of Democrats in very close races are not asking for the president to come out and campaign for them.
Meanwhile, Ramesh, former President Donald Trump has a new nickname for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Ron DeSanctimonious. Let's talk about or take a look at what Trump told supporters at a rally on Saturday in Miami.
We're winning big, big, big in the Republican Party for the nomination like nobody's ever seen before. Let's see, there it is, Trump at 71, Ron DeSanctimonious at 10%. Mike Pence at 7. Oh, Mike's doing better than I thought.
All right, Ramesh, Trump clearly seems to be looking forward to 2024. You know, if he's calling names, it's going to happen.
Well, I think he needs to workshop that one about DeSantis a little bit more. It's not up there with the best of Trump zingers. I think it's a moment that should illustrate to Republicans who are hoping for a big election night this year or tomorrow that President Trump is not somebody who really cares that much about the welfare of the Republican Party. He cares about himself. Nobody who was looking to the interest of the party as a whole would be saying, let's attack a governor facing re-election. And instead of being all united going into this midterm. But that's what he decided to do because he's annoyed or upset, angry about the idea that DeSantis might have the temerity to run for president.
So, Michael, Democrats have a substantial advantage when it comes to Americans' trust of handling abortion rights and climate change, but those are far less likely to be, top issues for voters. Did Democrats misstep on their messaging, you think, by focusing on abortion rights rather than the economy?
No, I don't think so. I think if you go back and look at what happened after the Dobbs decision, and we actually look at the data, of course, about what has happened so far in terms of votes and data, we know that it closed the intensity gap, right? Democrats and Republicans are now about even. There is no enthusiasm gap, and we're not seeing that in any of the early vote data as well. Also, in New York 19, which is sort of a microcosm of a swing district, Pat Ryan ran his whole campaign based off of abortion and reproductive rights. The DCCC had him down 3 points the day of the election, and he ended up winning that district in a surprise upset. Not only that, it put voter registration, people registered to vote, through the roof as a result of the Dobbs decision. And Democrats all outraised Republican candidates, not so much the committees and the PACs, but certainly the candidates. So I don't know if you can say one was better or the other. I do know that it made Democrats much more intensified about voting in this election.
So, Jay, Republicans have been hammering Democrats and President Biden on the economy, a real challenge for Democrats in this administration. If Republicans win back the House or Senate or both, Let's just talk about what happens to President Biden's economic agenda, and is he going to be able to push anything through?
Yeah, and Kira, as you know, control of the Senate is somewhat up for grabs, but Republicans in the House are already measuring the drapes. They very much believe that they will take the power back in that chamber. And on the economy, they've already laid out an agenda. They're looking at spending cuts. They're looking at rolling back portions of the Inflation Reduction Act, which was passed entirely by Democrats, obviously signed by President Biden, particularly the new funding and resources that the act gives to the IRS. We heard Kevin McCarthy, who's likely, if Republicans take back the House, to be their Speaker of the House, lay out that priority today. So in addition to trying to roll back stuff, we also know Republicans, if they take control of that chamber, but Congress writ large, no matter what, will have to vote next year to raise the debt ceiling, or else the United States government will default on its debt. And so that big question hangs over whoever controls both chambers of Congress, because Republicans have already signaled that they might use that vote to raise the debt ceiling, the possibility of the United States government defaulting, to use it as a piece of negotiation to get spending cuts, to get changes to entitlement programs or some kind of reform for entitlements. All of that is still an open question. But again, there's a lot when it comes to the economy hanging over this new Congress.
So then, Michael, what do the next 2 years look like for Democrats on Capitol Hill if they lose either the House or Senate or both?
Look, I think it's going to be tough for the Biden White House. They will now have to adapt to their approach to governing while under siege. Governing while they're being investigated in various committees, and it will command a lot of the media attention, unfortunately. But what you can't say is that the president hasn't been a stabilizing factor in a very unstable time. I'm nervous about what that will mean when there's more friction between the president and Congress. They weren't always partners to him in the first 2 years, but he still managed to get a lot passed through Congress, from prescription drugs to veterans' health to infrastructure, gun safety, gun safety, and that was, I think, emblematic of what you saw him as a former legislator do and work with the legislative branch. But I'm nervous that will go away.
You know, Ramesh, Kevin McCarthy would likely become the Speaker of the House if Republicans gain control. He says the first piece of legislation they will introduce would focus on the border. President Biden could go ahead and veto anything that he doesn't support. Can Republicans get an immigration package passed into law, or would that just be something symbolic at this point?
Well, I think that there will be any number of pieces of legislation, assuming that Republicans take the House, that will be designed to highlight contrasts between the parties, and the Republicans are going to try to use to make their case going forward into 2024. There will also be pieces of legislation. The debt ceiling would be one, budget bills would be another, where there's the potential that Republicans try to use some leverage to get some of their way on policy issues, but there's always a chance they'll miscalculate, they'll ask for too much, there'll be shutdowns that go against them. So the politics of that will just have to be played out. I do think, though, that if Republicans take the House by a solid margin, if they not only take the Senate, but have more than 51 votes in the Senate after the elections, we are going to hear more discussion on the Democratic side about who should be the Democratic nominee in 2024, and that there will be more vocal calls for Joe Biden to step aside.
All right, so Jay, one more, if you don't mind. The Justice Department actually announced today its plans to monitor compliance with federal voting rights laws. What are we learning about that?
Yeah, that's pretty par for the course for DOJ. They do it every election. They did it in 2020. There are more cities on this list than there were in 2020. This is a different Department of Justice with a different administration. But it does come, obviously, amid concerns that we hear repeatedly from Democrats about access to the polls, about possible what they would call voter suppression. Republicans have called those concerns, obviously, overblown. The proof will be in the pudding on Tuesday as to what voter turnout looks like. But this is an election that does come after a wave of new elections rules that were passed by Republicans in Republican state legislatures and Republican governors in the wake of the 2020 election.
All right, Jay O'Brien, Ramesh Ponnuru, also Michael LaRosa. Appreciate all three of you. ABC News Live will have complete coverage of the 2022 midterms tomorrow beginning at 7 a.m. Eastern, and special election night coverage led by our David Muir and also Lindsay Davis and the entire ABC News political team. That's beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern. And don't forget to vote if you haven't already.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.